Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 39 years old, a financial analyst in Denver, and if you'd asked me a month ago what our marriage looked like, I would have said steady. Not perfect, just solid. We paid the mortgage early, knew each other's coffee orders, and could run a Saturday errand loop with military efficiency, hardware store, dry cleaning, groceries, without needing to say more than a handful of words. I mistook that rhythm for health. Routine can hide a lot when you're good at keeping pace. Friday nights were for takeout, and a movie we rarely finished. I had sesame noodles steaming on the counter and a bottle of Pinot open when she came through the door with a spiral notebook hugged to her chest. No kiss. No, how was your day? She crossed the kitchen like she was walking into a meeting room and set the notebook on the dining table with the care people give to paperwork they've rehearsed. We need to rewrite the rules of our marriage, she said. Her tone was cool, almost professional. I've heard tense sentences in boardrooms, always cushioned with phrases like explore options and revisit assumptions. She skipped the padding. There was no tremor in her voice, just decision. Detachment has its own kind of confidence. The notebook had a blue cover with a faint coffee ring along the spiral. She'd written on the front in black marker, our new rules. I flipped it open. Her handwriting ran in neat, forward-leaning lines, the kind she used in birthday cards before the messages got shorter. At the top of the first page, framework for a healthier marriage. It read like a proposal, but it felt like a verdict. The first item was separate finances. Simple words, heavy meaning. We'd always pooled money, mortgage, savings, travel, the emergency fund that mostly covered tires and dentists. Seeing that line first told me the rest wouldn't be about us. It would be about boundaries drawn with a ruler. Next came personal space as a priority. Underneath, she'd added tidy bullets. Weekends scheduled independently, privacy as default, no obligation to explain time away. On paper it sounded clean. In my gut it sounded like an exit ramp with fresh paint. Then, no intimacy obligations. No context or let's work on it. Just a statement that the most private part of our connection would now be optional, and only by consent as she defined it. I stared at that line longer than the others. It didn't accuse. It erased. The last section redefined routines. Dinner together optional. Family visits optional. Shared plans subject to individual approval. The word optional repeated like a drumbeat. The page looked like freedom. It read like distance dressed in business casual. She stayed standing while I read, arms crossed, weight balanced on one heel, studying my face the way a manager reads a quarterly slide. I kept my expression even. In my job, the first reaction you show is often the leverage you lose. I turned another page and found more of the same. Carve out, pare down, protect self. She'd written a sentence in the margin, light, not heavy, underlining it twice. Beautiful word for a window, unsafe word for a promise. I closed the notebook. The cardboard made a small thud on the oak that felt louder than the HVAC hum and the neighbor's distant music. She let herself sit then, smoothing her skirt, letting quiet say what she didn't. I waited for a tremble, a flicker of doubt. Nothing. If anything, relief softened her shoulders, like she'd finally turned in a paper that took weeks to write. I'll review it, I said. The sentence surprised me with how calm it sounded leaving my mouth. She nodded. The nod of someone who believes they've chosen the courageous option and expects the room to agree. She poured a glass of water, found a show, and left the notebook open on the table like a flag planted on shared land. We ate at the counter. I slid her chopsticks across. She said thanks without looking up from her phone. No argument followed, which somehow stung more than one would have. Conflict at least implies heat. We were running on the cool efficiency of new policy. After dinner, I carried the notebook into my office and placed it beside my monitor. Years of looking at contracts and budgets have trained me to read what's missing as carefully as what's present. There were no lines about respect, none about commitment. Love appeared once at the bottom of a page. Love should feel light, not heavy or obligation. I traced the ink with my eyes and tried to remember the last time love between us felt anything but managed. The signs had been there in small, polite adjustments. Late evenings at long workouts that didn't leave a sweat pattern on her shirt. Weekends drifting towards separate plans. Her phone answering to a new set of rules. face down on the table, notifications silenced, a new code she never offered. Touch had become careful, like I was a stove she double-checked before laying a palm on. I gave generous explanations. Work stress, personal growth, seasons. You can keep a routine running a long time by feeding it generous explanations. I flipped the notebook again. The words were tidy, the logic appealing if the goal was to avoid disappointment. That was the point, I realized. This was risk management. You can't divide life like a spreadsheet and expect intimacy to balance. You can, however, keep everything light enough that nothing weighs enough to hold. Back in the living room, she'd found a show with soft lighting and soft music. I sat, and she glanced over with that measuring look people give you after they've said something that changed the room. I kept my face neutral, the same way I do when a client reveals they want the numbers to tell a different story than the numbers can. Halfway through the episode, she muted the TV and said, "So? I'll review it," I repeated. She unmuted the TV and leaned back into the couch, satisfied again. The scene on the screen moved without landing. My mind was elsewhere, counting what the notebook was telling me in a language she could defend to her friends. She wanted distance she could call healthy. She wanted permission to leave before leaving. She wanted a verdict without the ugliness of a fight. I went to bed late. She was asleep, or pretending well. I lay on my back and watched the ceiling fan measure time in quarters. For blades, steady rotation, an engine that would keep turning a while even if the power was cut. That's how momentum works. You can coast on it until you forget you're just spinning. Morning made everything ordinary again. I brewed coffee, poured hers into the chipped mug she likes, set it on the counter where she'd find it. Not a peace offering. A habit, closed neatly. She came in, lifted the cup, said thanks, and walked back out. The notebook left open on the table where sun lit the coffee ring into a pale halo. Before I left for the office, I slid the notebook into a drawer. I didn't hide it. I just took it off the table. She wanted a freer version of marriage. I understood the appeal. Freedom is clean when it's honest. It looks different when it arrives as clauses that preempt touch and call it growth. I locked the door behind me and felt something settle low and quiet in my chest. She thought she'd handed me terms to negotiate. What she'd given me was a written goodbye that let her keep her hands clean. I'd said I would review it. And I would, thoroughly in my own way. The week after the notebook, she didn't ease into her new rules. She enforced them. Saturday morning, I found a calendar invite removed from our shared app, dinner with friends we'd committed to 2 months ago. She said she'd still go. It's better if we don't present as a unit for a while. Present as a unit. Like we were a brand, she was retooling for a relaunch. I told her I'd stay home and get some work done. She nodded, relieved. That told me enough. She posted photos that night. Bar patio, candlelight, her chin tilted high. Caption with lines about reclaiming time and honoring self. Our friends noticed I wasn't there. A couple texted to check in. I answered simply, plans changed. No commentary. I wasn't going to start telling my side like a teenager in a group chat. Sunday, she came back hot. The notebook went on the table again, open to a page I hadn't seen, this one labeled implementation. She started reading from it like a script, separate bedrooms for better sleep, independent weekends, financial autonomy. When I didn't argue, she got louder, as if my calm made her words feel smaller. This is happening, she said, tapping the margin with a pen. I won't be negotiated down from my needs. I said I heard her. I said I understood the clarity. Both statements were true. By Monday, the guest room had turned into her space. My winter coats were pushed to one side. Her dresses hung in a new row, tags still on some of them. The nightstand held a stack of self-help paperbacks with covers that promised boundaries in 3 weeks. I stood in the doorway and took inventory, not of her things, but of the feeling. It was paperwork in motion. That afternoon, I noticed our streaming accounts logged out on the living room TV and her shopping profiles removed from the browser. Clean cuts. Then an alert from the bank. A transfer out of our joint checking, labeled personal offset. She had created a new account and moved money. No secret. Just a line item. When she got home, I asked one question, steady. Is there someone else? She didn't blink. That's a controlling question. Then she added, louder. And it violates the spirit of the new rules. Spirit, not truth. Tuesday ran hotter. She announced she'd be trialing separate weekends starting immediately. I had already booked a short hike for us in Boulder. She laughed when I reminded her. "That's not my job anymore," she said, like I'd assigned her extra shifts. She spent the evening on speakerphone with two friends whose voices I recognized, the chorus that had been echoing in her head for weeks. Every sentence they fed her returned to me polished and sharp. "He needs to adapt. He's threatened by your growth. Don't let him guilt you." I cooked myself dinner, washed the pan, and let the house settle. Silence can be a form of leadership. You don't always steer with the wheel. Sometimes you just stop pressing the gas. On Wednesday, she picked a fight before work. No preamble. "You've been passive-aggressive since Friday," she said, flinging open the dishwasher as if the plates had an opinion. "If you have a problem with my rules, say it." So I said it. The notebook isn't a marriage. It's a separation with bullet points. She stared at me, lips parted, then closed the dishwasher like she was slamming a file. "If you can't handle a modern relationship, that's on you." Modern, to her, meant unilateral. It meant I was supposed to smile, while she withdrew piece by piece. I kept my voice level. "This is the first time you've said out loud that what you want isn't a marriage." She grabbed her bag, said she'd be late, and left. That night she showed up 2 hours past what she'd texted and smelled like a hotel lobby. Expensive soap and recirculated air. "Don't interrogate me," she said, toes already pointed toward the hallway. "Under the new rules, I don't account for my time." I didn't ask a second question. I don't repeat myself to make a point. I repeat myself to confirm a fact. I had my answer. Thursday was public. She'd invited colleagues for a casual wine, and at some point the conversation rotated to work-life balance. She said, in a tone I recognized from panels and podcasts, that some men confuse stability with control. She looked at me when she said control. Someone laughed too loud to fill the space. I kept my hands around my glass and counted to 5 twice. After they left, she said my energy had embarrassed her. "You were brooding. I was breathing. There's a difference." I told her I wouldn't host again. She told me she didn't ask for my permission. Friday morning brought the most aggressive turn. She dragged a suitcase into the hallway, light but loud on the hardwood, and announced she'd be staying out. I need a clean mental break to evaluate our dynamic. I asked a single question, the last one I'd bother asking as if answers would fix anything. "What outcome are you pushing for?" She stared like I'd sprung a trap. "I want options." Options are great for portfolios. In marriage, they mean one person wants a parachute while the other keeps flying the plane. She left at noon without looking back. I made coffee and took the blue notebook from the drawer. I read it again, page by page, not to understand her better, but to remove any remaining optimism that this was about repair. It was about repositioning. If I accepted the terms, I'd be signing a document that converted me from partner to utility. That was the clarity I'd been waiting for, and it arrived because she pushed, not because I pried. She came home late Saturday afternoon with that jet-lag brightness you get from spending too much time in places that smell like fresh lilies and carpet glue. She tossed the suitcase by the guest room and asked if I'd eaten. I said yes. She hovered, clearly ready for a round. "You seem fine," she tried. I nodded. Fine is what a man is when he stops negotiating his worth. I asked her one more thing, and I kept it narrow. "So the notebook is the marriage now?" She squared up like a coach before a game. "Yes. Adapt or leave." "Thank you for being clear," I said. That was the end of that conversation. By Sunday, the pressure turned into small vandalism. Favorite coffee mug relocated to the trash. A framed photo taken down and leaned face first against the wall. The petty stuff people do when they want you to explode so they can call you the problem. I took a picture of each change and filed them in a folder on my phone labeled Notes. Not to build a case for internet strangers, to stop myself from rewriting history later. Calm is easier when you can prove to yourself what happened. I said fewer words that day than I usually do by breakfast. I opened a new email draft and typed 3 names, attorneys whose cards I'd saved a year ago for a work matter and never used. I stared at the subject line and left it blank. I closed the draft and opened a different note. Copies. Driver's license, marriage certificate, house documents, account statements. Monday, I'd scan what mattered and place a set in my office safe. None of it was revenge. All of it was preparation. That night she stood in the hallway and said we should tell friends we were shifting to a healthier model. I said we should say nothing until there was something finished to say. She called that controlling. I called it adult. She slept in the guest room with the door locked. I lay in the dark and counted the seconds it took the HVAC to click off after the temperature hit its mark. 12. A reasonable system, doing what it was built to do. I could respect that. When morning came, I made 2 cups of coffee and left hers on the counter like always. Closing loops isn't weakness, it's discipline. As I grabbed my keys, I heard the guest room door open. She waited for me to look back. I didn't. The pressure she'd applied all week had done its work. I was finished being managed by a notebook. I left the house with one sentence set like a pin in my mind. She wanted aggressive? Fine. She'd get honest. The next move wouldn't be a louder argument. It would be action, measured and final. I woke before the alarm and didn't reach for my phone. I made coffee, set 1 cup on the counter for her like always, then picked it up again and poured it back into the pot. Routine is a leash if you keep fastening it yourself. I showered, dressed, and pulled the blue notebook from the drawer one last time. I didn't need to read it. I needed to answer it. At 8:05 a.m., I called the first attorney on my list and asked for an urgent consult. The assistant recognized my tone and found a 10 a.m. slot. I spent the next 90 minutes scanning the documents I'd tagged yesterday. Marriage certificate, house deed, titles, last 12 months of bank and credit statements, retirement accounts, emails that showed the new rules, in her words. Nothing vindictive. Just a clear picture for someone whose job is to separate facts from drama. I put the scans on an encrypted drive and threw a duplicate onto a hardware key. Twice as steady. Thrice as paranoid. I stopped at steady. The office sat 5 floors up in a brick building that used to be a warehouse. A reception area with quiet chairs and a pot of coffee that tasted like decisions. My attorney, short hair, direct eyes, a legal pad instead of a laptop, listened without interrupting, then asked me 2 questions. What outcome do you want? And how much time are you willing to spend getting there? Clean separation, I said. No chaos. I'm not trying to punish her. I'm trying to be done. She nodded, drew a box on the pad, and divided it in 4. Assets, debts, housing, communication. We're going to remove ambiguity, she said. That's how you avoid chaos. Then she explained the steps. File for legal separation with a petition for temporary orders. Exclusive access standards for the home. Clear rules about accounts. No dissipating assets. No overnight guests while we're under the same roof. Prepare a proposed settlement term sheet that treats separate finances as her ask and my compliance, not my retaliation. Serve her through a third party, calmly, without drama. Move future pay into a new account. Remove authorized users from my cards. Update beneficiaries where the law allows. Document everything without commentary. Communicate through counsel. I felt something uncoil in my chest as she spoke. Clarity is a sedative when you've been living on adrenaline. We drafted the petition together, line by line. The language was dry on purpose. No editorial, no story, just facts. Date of marriage, date of separation, list of community assets and separate property, request for temporary orders. The term sheet was even cleaner. We proposed a sale or buyout of the house within 90 days. 2 vehicles remain with current drivers. Retirement accounts divided per statute, each responsible for personal credit cards. Joint checking frozen upon service, remaining balance to be moved to an attorney trust account until disbursement. Spousal support reserved until disclosures, but neither party to seek temporary support before the first conference. I initialed each page the way I initial term sheets at work, quietly, with full attention. By lunch, the drafts were done and the retainer paid. My attorney left me in a small room to read the packet again without her. I did, slowly, looking for anything that smelled like pettiness. There was none. The only sentence that felt like a knife was the truth. Marriage irretrievably broken. I signed. On my way home, I stopped at HR, filled out a direct deposit change to a new account, and removed a dependent from my benefits where I could without violating notice requirements. I placed a fraud alert with the credit bureaus and froze any open lines we hadn't used in a year. I closed the store credit card I never wanted and she loved. If she noticed, she could call her own bank under her own rules. Separate finances begins with separation of access. Back at the house, I worked through the practicals. I inventoried our valuables with my phone and emailed the list to myself and my attorney. I placed my passport, my grandfather's watch, and a thumb drive of family photos in the office safe. I changed the office door lock, Not to keep her out of her home, but to keep the documents in one place. I left the rest of the house untouched. Quiet control isn't a show. She came in at 6, dropped her keys, and paused when she saw me at the dining table with a binder, a black legal binder with tabs. She smiled the way you smile at a child building a fort. Another notebook? A plan, I said. And counsel. The smile slid. Counsel. I retained an attorney this morning. You'll be served tomorrow. I wanted to let you know before a stranger knocks. The room changed temperature. She reached for the old script. Accusation first, then performance. You're overreacting. I asked for boundaries, not divorce. You asked for separate finances, separate time, separate rooms, and no intimacy obligations, I said calmly. That's separation. I'm just aligning the paperwork. She laughed once, too loud. This is controlling. You're trying to trap me with legal stuff because you can't handle change. I pushed the binder across the table so she could see the tabs labeled clearly. Petition, file copy, temporary orders, requested, term sheet, proposal, disclosures, list, keys and accounts, checklist. I'm not trapping you. I'm freeing both of us from pretending. She didn't touch the binder. You can't freeze the joint account. I need. You asked for separate finances, I said. My future pay goes to my account. The joint account balance will sit in trust until division. Your personal account remains yours. I won't touch it. She opened the binder then, flipping pages with a quickness that tried to look like authority and read like panic. Temporary orders? No overnight guests? Exclusive access to the office? What is this, punishment? It's stability, I said. It protects both of us while we untangle. She slammed the binder closed. You're doing this to hurt me. No, I said. I'm doing this so we stop hurting each other by pretending the notebook is a marriage. There was a long minute where neither of us moved. She was waiting for me to break the stillness with an apology she could reject. I let the silence work. Finally, she asked, softer. So that's it then? That's the process, I said. We'll live by temporary orders until we agree or a judge decides. Communication through counsel starting tomorrow. You'll get a call to accept service, or a server can meet you here at a time you choose. I prefer the call. She stared at the closed binder like it might open itself and offer nicer terms. I never said I wanted divorce. You said adapt or leave. I replied, steady. I'm adapting to the version of marriage you wrote. It looks like leaving because that's what it is. She moved toward anger again, grasping for heat. My friends are going to hear about this. Then they'll hear the truth, I said. That we acted like adults when we couldn't agree on being a couple. I stood, not to loom, but to end the meeting. There are copies for you in the binder. If you'd prefer your attorney to pick them up, say when. I slid my keys into my pocket and turned to the kitchen. I washed my coffee mug and set it on the drying rack. No second cup on the counter. That loop was closed. Before bed, I sent 2 emails, one to my attorney confirming I delivered the packet and one to myself with the subject line, Peace is the plan. Then I walked to the guest room door and knocked once. She opened it a crack, eyes bright and hard. Service can be by phone tomorrow between 10 and noon, she said. I'll be home. Thank you, I said. No sarcasm. In our room, I changed the sheets and opened the window an inch. City air moved in, thin and cool. I thought about the first night we slept here, boxes everywhere, her laughing at how my pillow was flatter than a file folder. The memory didn't hurt. It just felt past tense, like reading an old job title on a resume and recognizing the person while knowing you're not him anymore. Morning met me with that particular quiet only houses know before people decide what the day will be. I brewed 1 cup of coffee, walked to the table, and opened my calendar. There was work to do and a life to run. At 10:17, my phone lit up with a number I didn't know. Service by phone, professional voice, scripted language. I confirmed my identity. She confirmed hers from the other room. Legal words moved like a train, steady, unstoppable, indifferent to scenery. When it ended, she didn't emerge. I didn't expect her to. I placed the phone face down and exhaled. No grief, just space where pressure had been. The counterstrike wasn't loud. I hadn't tried to win her back with speeches or chase a moving target with flowers and promises. I'd replaced improvisation with structure and turned a notebook into a timeline with signatures. I rinsed my cup, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. On the way out, I paused at the drawer where the blue notebook used to live. Empty, like it had never mattered. I locked the door behind me and stepped into a day that didn't require me to argue my value. I was done playing. The next moves would happen on paper and in courtrooms if necessary, not in a living room where rules changed by mood. Respect is not a negotiation. It's a boundary, and I had finally put mine in writing. The morning after service, the house sounded different. No more negotiation disguised as conversation, no more, "we'll see," hanging in the air. Paper had replaced mood. I made 1 cup of coffee and answered 2 emails from my attorney. Confirmation of service, calendar holds for disclosures, and the temporary orders conference. I forwarded the notes to my work account and locked my phone. Boundaries aren't statements, they're systems. By noon, she tried the first angle, guilt. A text with an old photo of us on the porch the week we moved in, her handwriting on the image. "Remember this?" I let the phone buzz out. We'd agreed, counsel only. 30 minutes later, another message slipped through, longer this time, about how separation didn't have to be hostile, how we could pause the legal machine and talk like adults. My attorney drafted a calm reply. Parties will communicate through counsel. Temporary orders preserve peace. Settlement proposal enclosed. No heat, just rails. That night, she stood in the hallway with damp hair and the kind of robe people buy when they need the mirror to say something it can't. "We don't have to be dramatic," she said, soft, leaning into the doorframe of our bedroom. "We can keep some things the same while we figure out the rest." I stepped aside so she could see the binder on the nightstand, tabs visible, edges square. "The temporary orders include separate rooms," I said, even. "It's what you wanted. No intimacy obligations. I'm honoring that." Her mouth tightened. "You're weaponizing my words." "I'm respecting them." The robe lost its power then. She pivoted to anger. "You're humiliating me," she said. "Freezing accounts? Making me get served at home? You wanted to embarrass me." "Embarrassment is public," I said. "This was private, by phone, when you chose. I'm not performing. I'm proceeding." The next day, the chorus arrived. A group text pinged, 2 of her friends and a cousin I'd met twice. They wanted context. They offered neutral ground to talk. One wrote a paragraph about how men often lash out when women draw boundaries. I didn't answer. My attorney sent a succinct note to my wife's counsel instead. "Third-party harassment will be documented. Parties to refrain from recruiting allies. All discussions to occur between counsel or at mediation." The group chat went quiet, then dissolved into individual texts I also ignored. When attention is the coin, silence is expensive. On Thursday, she tried practical sabotage. We had agreed, through counsel, to meet a realtor for a preliminary walkthrough, part of the plan to sell or buy out within 90 days. She forgot to be home, then texted that she was stuck and could we push. I let the agent walk the house with me alone. I took notes, measured rooms, asked about timing. When her car pulled in as the agent was leaving, she staged a performance in the driveway, loud words about being railroaded and predatory timelines. The agent glanced at me. I kept my face still. The proposed schedule came from both attorneys. I said, calm enough for the neighbor watering his lawn to overhear the professionalism and not the drama. The agent nodded. The neighbor returned to his hose. Performances fall flat without an audience. Friday brought her parents. They arrived without warning, a tight duo at the door, mother already braced for battle, father holding a small envelope with repair receipts he'd paid for years ago. I invited them in. We sat at the dining table. The blue notebook was gone. The black binder remained. Her mother started with the script, how I'd overreacted, how marriage takes compromise, how lawyers make things worse. Her father waited until she cooled, then asked me the only question that mattered. Is this what you truly want, son? It's what's left, I said. She moved to separate finances, separate rooms, separate lives. The paperwork matches the reality. He looked at his daughter. Did you say those things? She began, eyes flashing to me, hoping I'd fill the silence for her. I slid a single page across the table. Her first notebook page, scanned and printed, separate finances, underlined in her hand. No commentary. He read. He nodded once, quietly. Her mother's face collapsed into a mix of shock and indignation, the kind that comes when the narrative you prepared doesn't survive contact with facts. They left with murmured promises to talk to her. They didn't ask me for anything else. That weekend, she went to a friend's apartment and posted photos designed to signal freedom. Laughing on a balcony, feet on a coffee table, a caption about lightness. The likes came from predictable accounts. A mutual friend, one who doesn't choose sides, sent me a message I didn't answer. She's spiraling a bit. You're handling this like an adult. That's all it said. Short. True. Enough. On Monday, her attorney called mine to say she wanted the temporary orders modified to allow overnight guests in her room. My attorney asked one question. So we're converting a marital home into a boarding house mid-case. The request died on arrival. Consequences teach quicker than lectures. She understood, perhaps for the first time, that options cost. Bills started landing where they used to float. With the joint account frozen and my direct deposit rerouted, her personal charges met her personal balance. I watched none of it directly. Only the neutral ledger my attorney shared before the conference. Numbers don't judge. They merely insist. The boutique orders thinned. The streaming subscriptions in her name paused. She canceled a weekend trip she'd floated to friends, citing work. The truth was line-itemed in black and white. In the house, the small vandalism stopped. The mug I liked remained on its shelf. The frame she'd turned face down stood upright again. She began leaving for work on time and coming home on time, not out of reconciliation but out of structure. She avoided me in the kitchen, choosing to stand at the counter and eat quickly rather than sit opposite the binder. Every now and then she hovered at the doorway like she might ask a real question. What happens after the 90 days? But the words never formed. Pride is loud, regret is quiet. 2 days before the temporary orders conference, she knocked on the office door I'd rekeyed and asked if we could press pause to rethink the messaging. Not the plan, the messaging. I opened the door far enough to keep it a boundary. We can adjust proposals through counsel, I said. I won't negotiate in hallways. She stared like I'd spoken a language she used to know and couldn't remember. The conversation ended with the smallest nod, the kind you give a truth you hate. At the conference, everything played out in muted tones. 2 attorneys, a commissioner with tired eyes, a speakerphone on a long table. My attorney summarized the situation. Hers tried to inject feeling. The commissioner kept redirecting to facts. Temporary orders entered. Maintain status quo on major bills. No asset dissipation. Exclusive use of the office to me, of the guest room to her. No overnights. Calendar for disclosures and mediation. The commissioner closed with a sentence that landed harder than I expected. The court encourages the parties to treat each other with respect while they transition. Even the law knew what to ask for and what not to pretend. Afterward, she texted, breaking protocol, to say, I didn't think you'd go this far. I didn't respond. My attorney sent a summary email instead. The distance was clarity. When you remove the hope that someone will be who they were, the grief leaves and choices remain. Word traveled as it does. The colleagues who had laughed too loudly at her control line now avoided the topic around me. One pulled me aside and said, for what it's worth, you've been steady. I thanked him and returned to my reports. Steady isn't a performance either, it's a posture. Her game, the notebook, the rules, the public posture of enlightenment, broke exactly where games always break, in contact with outcomes. Separate finances felt liberating until personal rent arrived. Separate rooms felt powerful until 2 a.m. felt lonely. Optional routines felt breezy until a judge translated them into calendars and terms. She had asked for air and discovered altitude. Late one night she knocked again, softer than before. I opened the door. She held the blue notebook, edges worn, coffee ring darker than I remembered. I made a mistake, she said, the words quiet enough to be honest. I didn't think you'd complete it. I know, I said. You wrote a beginning that ends itself. She looked down at the notebook like it might offer a rewrite clause. She passed it to me, as if returning a library book she no longer wanted. I placed it on the shelf beside the binder and closed the office door gently. She stayed in the hallway a long minute, then walked back to the guest room and turned the lock. Her silence, finally, was recognition. And recognition is where manipulation ends and reality begins. The silence after her meltdown was hollow. She had gone from banging fists on the table, shrieking about partnership, to sitting on the edge of the couch with her face in her hands, sobbing like a child caught stealing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who wanted to rewrite the rules of marriage was now begging for the old ones to protect her. But I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. She had spent too long testing my patience, cutting at me with sarcasm, threats, and ultimatums. She believed I'd always bend. This time, I didn't. I stood over her, calm but immovable. You wanted a new contract, remember? Well, contracts are binding. You can't shout your way out of this one. Her mascara was running, her hair a mess. She looked up at me, eyes wide, panic setting in. You're really doing this? You're actually ending it? Yes, I said simply. I'm not your audience anymore. I'm not your punching bag. And I sure as hell won't be your ATM while you rewrite the rules to suit only you. She tried bargaining. We can fix this. We can go back. Forget the rules. I'll do better. I shook my head. No, respect isn't negotiable. Once you shred that, there's no contract left. Her breathing quickened, and she grabbed my arm. Please, don't do this. Don't leave me like this. What will I tell people? That's your problem, I said coldly. Maybe tell them the truth, that you tried to turn a marriage into a one-sided deal, and it backfired. I walked to my desk where the folder of documents sat neatly stacked. Bank separation finalized, legal notice filed, and her exit strategy reduced to paper and signatures. Every step had been calculated, every clause airtight. She couldn't twist it, couldn't undo it. I placed the folder on the coffee table in front of her. Read it, sign it, or fight it. Either way, you're out of my life. Her lip trembled. You can't just erase me. After everything, after all these years, you're just walking away? No, I said firmly. You erased yourself the moment you decided your comfort mattered more than our marriage. I'm just signing off on what you started. Her sobs filled the room, but they no longer pierced me. I'd grown numb. No, stronger than numb. I was clear, grounded, finally awake to the reality she had forced me into. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. You wanted freedom? You got it. I hope you enjoy writing rules for an empty house. As I opened the door, she lunged forward, her voice cracking. You'll regret this. You'll regret letting me go. I paused, looked back once, and gave her the calmest smile she'd ever seen. No, the only regret I had was wasting time thinking you'd ever value me. That regret ends tonight. The door closed behind me with a click that sounded like finality itself. I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt lighter because I was walking back to myself. Respect isn't negotiable. And once you stop negotiating with someone who never respected you, the world opens up again.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.